I will answer them. So so today I'm gonna talk about my joint work with Ramis from IBM Quantum, and it's on quantum Merkle tree, and this paper can be found on the archive. Okay, it's the link, or you just Google it. So let's get started. So first, here's the plan for today's talk. So first, I will tell you the construction of the quantum Merkle tree, which is in the title, and then I will give some potential applications of this construction, and then I will list some open questions. So before that, I want to say that we don't know how to prove the full security of this quantum Merkle tree construction, and there's some good reasons for it. So think about this as an invitation for you to prove that. So yeah, and that will be a lot of open questions. Okay, and so let's get started. So before getting to the quantum Merkle tree, first we look at succinct commitment problem in crypto in general. So roughly speaking, so in a commitment scheme, a party or it's called a prover, it stores a piece of information. For example, a bit string with the promise of not changing it. And this information later can be accessed by another party called the verifier, who can learn the information and verify that it was not meddled with. Of course, the most important thing is that we want to have succinctness, in the sense that the verifier can learn any part of the information by receiving a short proof from the prover. Short means polylogous. So for example, the verifier may have a huge dictionary he or she wants to store on the cloud, but the verifier don't have space for a local copy. So the verifier store this big dictionary to a cloud. But also the verifier is worried that maybe the cloud will just maliciously change the content of the dictionary. So the verifier wants the verifier to whenever the verifier makes the query, the verifier wants the prover to convince the verifier that the prover did not, or the prover or the cloud did not change the content of the dictionary. So that's a succinct commitment scheme. And I just described the example. So you may want to store a string on a private server on a cloud and have access to it. So you also want to be convinced it's not changed. So this has many applications in crypto. For example, the construction of protocols for secure coin flipping, some zero-knowledge proof system, and secure computation. Any question regarding this succinct commitment scheme? Okay.
No. Yeah, we are fine. We are fine.
Okay, thanks. So let's review the classical way of doing this succinct commitment scheme. It's called Merkle tree. So how does a Merkle tree operate? So let's say we have a string of length b times L. So L is a power of 2, and b is the block size. So first, given this string of b times L length, we partition it into L blocks. So for simplicity, we make L a power of 2, but in general, it's okay to you can just add some zeros at the end to make a power of 2. And the Merkle tree works as follows. So first, imagine we have a random hash function. In the practice, it's just like a SHA or MD5 type of thing. But in theory, we think about it as a random hash function. And you first apply edge H gets 2 blocks, and it outputs 1 block. So first, this edge, you apply its edge on the first layer, and you shrink the consecutive block into 1 block. And then you do the same, but you continue in its fashion. And at the end of the day, you keep doing this until you have the single block at the top. And this top is going to be the small commitment by the prover by the prover. So you imagine this verifier has the huge string X to store, and the prover will compute this top node, the commitment of X, and give it to the verifier. And from now on, the verifier don't have to store the whole string X. The verifier only needs to store this top commitment X as a small commitment to the string. And suppose now the verifier wants to know what's the second block. Let's see, the verifier will want to have local access to the whole string. So what the verifier do is that it just asks the prover to send back all the blocks in red, marked in red. So essentially, it's the other blocks. You look at the path from this second leaf to all the way to the root, and the prover should send back all the relevant blocks. The verifier starts from the leaves to the top and checks if the hash values sent by the prover actually match the top node he has, the verifier has. So if you look at this,
sorry, in this slide, do you need to do the verifier? Sorry, do the prover also need to return X3 and X4?
Oh no, because the prover only returns the red one, the hash value of X3 X4.
Okay.
Not X4. Yeah.
But then on the other side, I mean, to the left, the prover has to return X1 and X2. Why is that?
Oh, it's because the verifier is asking for X2. So the prover should start from X2.
I see.
And go all the way to the root. And the verifier. Okay, good. Thanks. Thanks for the question. This is essentially how the classical Merkle tree works. Whenever the verifier wants to know a single bit, let's say, the verifier first figure out which block the bit is in, and then the verifier asks the prover to send all the ancestors of that block together with their siblings. So that's the red part. And after having all the hash value, the verifier can check whether they are consistent with verifier's commitment X, the top hash value. And then it's very hard to cheat because if you think the argument is that if somehow the prover can cheat by first commitment to one string and then convince you to some wrong value, you can argue that the prover must be able to find a collision of this hash function. But a random function, it's very hard to find a collision in a random hash function. But that's not very important for today's talk. So we have this classical Merkle tree, which allows you to do the succinct commitment for classical strings. So what we want to do today is to make this quantum. Okay, what's the motivation for doing so? I mean, suppose there's a client who have a big quantum state, but maybe the client don't have the technology or the money to store the state at their lab. But the client want to delegate the client wants to store a quantum state to a private cloud, and then later have access to it. So the cloud should be able to provide a subset of the qubits from the stored state according to the client's queries. But of course, the client may be suspicious of the cloud. Maybe the cloud is having poor technology, or maybe the cloud is malicious. So the client wants proof from the cloud. The client wants proof to be convinced that the quantum state is actually not changed or like meddled with. Besides this seemingly practical application, there are also some more theoretical applications like succinct argument for QMA or quantum zero knowledge proof, and we'll see some soon. But the real question, if you look at the classical hash construction, the real question is that how do we hash a quantum state? So suppose we want to do something very similar to the classical Merkle tree. So we'll want to take a hash function and try to apply it to a quantum state. But this will immediately some issues will immediately arise. For example, the first, unlike classical case, the hash value you computed from a quantum state is of course entangled with the original state. So this is unique in the quantum state. For classical string, you compute something and you don't really change the old one. But in the quantum state, it's a different story. And second, computing the hash of a quantum state also change or even destroy the original state. If you destroy the original state, then how can the prover even send them back, because it's already destroyed? So that it's not clear how do you hash a quantum state. So we need to figure out some dedicated way to deal with it. So our solution here is to use the reversibility of quantum computing. So we really don't want the original state to be destroyed by our hashing, because otherwise the prover has no means to send them back if they're destroyed. And to ensure the prover will be able to send them back, we'll make use of the reversibility of quantum computing. And that's the idea behind our construction. So okay, let's look at how do we do a quantum Merkle tree here. So again, imagine we have B times L qubits, and again we for simplicity we say L is the power of 2 and the B is the block size. Think about B as polylog for simplicity. And so first, at the bottom is the original B times L qubit state. What we want to do is that the first thing comes to your mind is that maybe you can apply a quantum oracle to this 3 times B qubits. So we imagine we can take the quantum analog of a random hash function as this, which maps x and y. So x is 2B qubits, the y is B qubits, to x and y, x or h of x. H is the hash function. So this is just the normal way of making a Boolean function a quantum oracle. Maybe you can do this. That's the naive attempt. But if you look at this construction, you immediately realize this is this has a problem because it does not protect your face. If you use this to compute the hash, then the prover can actually just play with the face of the original state without you noticing. So we don't want to only use this quantum oracle version of hash function, because it doesn't protect you from the face attack. Okay, so what do we want to do here? So we make a very aggressive choice. Let's just apply a random hard unitary to this 3 times b qubits. So we take G as the most possible random unitary. It's a random hard unitary. So it's the most random choice of a hash function in some sense. So think about G as some sort of a hash function. So what we do here is similar to before, but we apply G on those bottom parts of the tree. And we keep going up until we apply G at the top 3 blocks to obtain a final top block, which is now entangled with every bit at the bottom. So because if you apply G at the leftmost 3b qubits, you entangle this this subroot with the first block and the second block. And if you keep doing this and you keep going up, eventually you'll have a commitment at the top, which is entangled with every bit below. And this is okay. And now the prover, after applying G in this from bottom to top, it obtains this commitment of the original state, and then the prover sends the top block to the verifier. So now the verifier keeps this top block. So after that, let's say the verifier wants to know the content of the second block. But also the verifier wants to be convinced that the prover is not like changing the state. So again, the prover sends all the ancestor blocks of the second block together with their siblings. So for the second block, that will be all the blocks marked in red. And now seeing all the blocks, the verifier is going to apply the inverse of the hard random unitary G from the root down to the bottom, down to the leaf. So after doing so, the verifier look at all those intermediate states. If they are all 0, the verifier accepts, meaning that the verifier didn't see anything wrong. But also the verifier measures those states in the computational basis, and if they are all 0, then the verifier accepts. If the verifier see anything non-zero, the verifier rejects. So essentially, the verifier is checking whether the prover didn't do anything suspicious. So we can observe that if the prover P follows the quantum Merkle tree faithfully, it starts with some G times L qubits at the bottom. It applies G from bottom to top, and it sends the top block to the verifier, and it sends all the red stuff to the verifier when the verifier asks something. If the prover faithfully implements this protocol, then we will accept with probability 1. This is because at the beginning, every intermediate state are 0. And essentially, the verifier is redoing prover's application of G. So those intermediate states should go back to their original content, which are all 0. So if the prover P follows the quantum Merkle tree faithfully, then V would accept. Of course, the question is whether we can show that if the verifier accepts, then the prover. Of course, the real question is whether we can show that. This is essentially the completeness, and the real question is whether we can show the soundness, meaning that if the verifier accepts, then no, that means if the verifier accepts and the prover is computationally bounded, then it means prover did not cheat, did not change the state. So that seems to be very hard to prove, and we actually leave it as an open question. But before talking about that, let's compare. Oh, any questions at this point? I just described the quantum Merkle tree essentially. Okay. I'll just keep going. So before talking more about the application, let's try to compare. So we have talked about both the quantum Merkle tree and the classical Merkle tree. So it's instructive to compare them and see what's different in the quantum situation. So in the quantum Merkle tree, a very interesting thing is that the prover must store all the intermediate states. So after the prover applies G, so the prover first prepares many intermediate states in R0, and the prover applies G to them to entangle those intermediate states with the original state. The prover cannot throw them away. The prover must store them, and because the prover needs to send those intermediate states to prover to the verifier if verifier asks for some blocks. Well, in a classical Merkle, and you cannot copy quantum state. And in a classical Merkle tree, the prover can always just recompute the needed intermediate values because it's classical, so it's not really like unique. You can always recompute anything you want from the original input stream. So that's a very interesting fact about the quantum version. Second, the more interesting one is actually the second. So because in the quantum setting, whenever the verifier asks for some qubits, the prover essentially lost it. So a qubit can only be revealed once. Of course, this makes complete sense because you cannot copy quantum qubits. So if the verifier asks for one qubit, the prover actually has to give the qubit to the verifier. And now the prover lost this qubit, so the prover cannot provide it again. This is exactly because you cannot copy quantum states. So while in a classical Merkle tree, you can always review a bit as many times as you want. Again, because classical information can be copied perfectly. So this is another very interesting difference between classical Merkle tree and the quantum Merkle tree. Finally, in a quantum Merkle tree, after the prover sends the verifier the top block, so now the prover lost the top block. The prover only has some random stuff. The prover have no access to the original quantum state without this top block. The prover will need this top block to be sent back to redo all the computations, right? So actually, in some sense, the prover is kind of blind after sending the root of the Merkle tree. The prover do not know the original quantum state anymore. But in a classical Merkle tree, prover knows the whole original string. And of course, this is again because classical strings can be copied, and the prover just keep a copy of the original string. That's fine. Computing hash value on classical string do not change the content of the classical string. Well, in the quantum case, if you apply random hard unitary to the original string, original quantum state, you completely obfuscate it, and you need to redo the G to get back the original state. So that's some very interesting difference between the quantum version and the classical version. Essentially, all due to the fact that you cannot clone quantum state. Okay, and so in fact, the last property is really interesting. It's essentially saying that the prover is actually blind in some sense. So maybe it can be useful for some other applications. We didn't think too much about it, but it's a very interesting property of the quantum version. So, okay, how do we analyze the security of quantum Merkle tree? The first, we need to have some model to analyze, because now we are modeling this G as a hard random unitary. So we need to define some model that prover and the verifier have access to a hard random unitary. So we introduce a new model called quantum hard random oracle model, which is inspired by the quantum random oracle model. So in the quantum hard random oracle model, both prover P and the verifier V get access to a hard random unitary G and its inverse G to the -1, G inverse. And G acts on lambda qubits. So lambda here is essentially 3 times B in the protocol, because you apply each time you apply G to 3 blocks. So lambda is 3 times B. And think about lambda as polylog, for example. So a protocol pi between prover P and the verifier V is a proof system for language L yes and L no if for every yes instance, the prover makes the verifier accept with very high probability. So we note that this with very high probability is over both the choice of the hard random oracle and the internal randomness of the prover and the verifier. So the verifier may do something random, like it's the quantum algorithm, so they are inherently random. But it's also over the choice of the hard random unitary G, but G is itself random. The soundness says that for every no instance and for all unbounded prover P that only makes a small number of queries to G and the G inverse, P star cannot convince V with more than negligible probability. So here we are making a strong claim that the P star can be unbounded. The only limitation of P star is that it cannot make more than polynomially many queries to the G and the G inverse. So this, of course, captures polynomial time prover, because you can only make polynomially many queries if you have polynomial time. But here we are thinking about it more like in some information theoretical model that if you make a very few number of queries, you don't know much about G and G inverse, and you really need to know much. You really need to have more information on G and G inverse to cheat. So if you don't have enough information on G and G inverse, you cannot cheat. Now that's the intuition to make this definition. So that's the completeness and soundness or I should say, essentially, we are just adopting the definition of quantum random oracle model. But now we just make the oracle hard random instead of a random Boolean function. So nothing new here, just to make a new model so we can analyze the output. Okay, so this is the quantum hard random oracle. So next we'll see how do we make use of this model how do we use the quantum Merkle tree to apply it to some interesting problems. So if you have any questions, it's a good time to pause a bit and okay, I'll probably just pause for
Why do you introduce the hard random oracle instead of just random oracle? Is there anything unique for that?
Yeah. So actually, yeah, I think I briefly discussed this. So that's some subtle issue with just like a usual oracle. So usually, if you have a Boolean function, you can make it a quantum oracle in this way. Like you map x, y to x, and y x or h of x. The issue here is that if you do this we can try to apply this O of x or sub h to do the quantum Merkle tree. But this is not secure because this does not protect the phase attack. The prover can actually play with the phase. Like it can add some like -1 to many like different components, and the verifier cannot detect it. So it's like the usual quantum oracle doesn't quite work because it does not prevent phase attack. So the idea is just to be very aggressive and putting the most random oracle here to completely obfuscate any structure.
Okay. I see.
Yeah. So it's quite possible that you can do something less random than a complete hard random oracle, yet still get the same thing. I think that's a very interesting question to.
Some sort of like T design, right? So.
Yes. So T design is one thing, or maybe you just like make a layer of Hadamard gate and then you apply a random Boolean function. That also could work, but we are so I guess we make this choice just because we want to select the most random things to obfuscate the quantum state into the maximal amount.
Okay.
And yeah, thanks for the question. And okay, let's get back. So let's look at one very interesting application for like fundamental question in quantum complexity theory called gap K local Hamiltonian. So what is a local Hamiltonian problem? So here we are given two constants alpha and beta, and we are given a K local Hamiltonian with so a K local Hamiltonian is the sum of K local terms. So for each, so imagine you have like n qubits, and you have like m terms hi. Each hi is a Hamiltonian, but it only acts on k qubits out of the n qubits. So it's local in the sense that each hi only acts on k qubits, and you take a sum of m such k local terms. Of course, each of them can act on different k qubits. And you want to decide whether the minimum in value of the sum of all the h is less than alpha times m or greater than beta times m. So each of the local term is between 0 and I. It's a very like a standard problem in quantum complexity theory. So it proves that if for some alpha, which is some negligible alpha, and for some 1 over polynomial beta, like it should be 1 over n to the 3 or something, this problem is QMA complete. QMA is just the quantum version of NP. We don't define it today, but it's the quantum version of NP. So we'll focus on the case that alpha and beta are two constants. Think about them as like 1/3 and 2/3. And it's conjectured that in that case, it's still QMA complete. And this is called the quantum TCP conjecture, which is a fascinating open question even for today. Still open, but it's a great open question. So let's see how do we make use of the quantum Merkle tree to get a very interesting argument proof system for this gap K local Hamiltonian problem. So first we have a verifier and a prover, and they both know a K local Hamiltonian. So they both know M term H1 to Hm, let's say. So the prover wants to convince the verifier that it's the yes case, meaning that the prover wants to convince the verifier the minimum n value is small. And it's guaranteed that the minimum n value is either small or large. Small means it's at most alpha times m, large means it's at least beta times m. And so the prover first it picks a quantum state phi. It runs the quantum Merkle tree on phi or on psi. Yes, sorry, it should be psi. And then what I mean is that it runs it applies G from bottom to top and sends the top block to the verifier. Now the verifier has the top block, and the prover lost the top block. And now the verifier just draw a random draw a random term Hi from H1 to Hm. So it's just an index I from 1 to n. And send the index to the prover. So now what does the prover do? The prover reviews the qubits in the support of H sub I. So H sub I may contain at most k qubits. H sub I only acts on at most k qubits. So the prover look at which blocks those k qubits belong to, and then it just send all the ancestors of those blocks to the verifier. So the prover is going to send some intermediate states. And first, the verifier is going to decommit. Use the previous algorithm. The verifier look at all the intermediate states it has, and it look at its top block it received at the first round. And then the verifier try to decommit by applying G inverse from top to bottom. Then the verifier is expected to see all zeros. Okay? So it measures all the intermediate stuff in the computational basis. If they are all zero, the verifier keep going. Otherwise, the verifier just resets. So, and then after that, the verifier measure the energy by performing the POVM HI and the I minus HI, and accept if and only if it sees the outcome 1 minus HI. So why it accept if it sees outcome 1 minus HI is because the yes case has small energy. And just to doing some quick calculation, you can see that if P commits to a quantum state psi and follows the quantum Merkle tree faithfully, then the verifier will successfully run the decommit algorithm and see all zero. And the verifier then the verifier essentially is just pick a random HI and measure the POVM HI y minus HI. And doing a quick calculation, you'll see that the V rejects with probability exactly the energy of this state phi with respect to the sum of all the HI and over M. This is just some quick calculation. And we call such a prover semi-honest. So now now we know that in the yes case, the minimum energy is at most alpha m. So the prover can commit to some quantum state with energy at most alpha m, meaning that V rejects with probability at most alpha, and consequently V accepts with probability at least 1 minus alpha. And similarly, in the no case, if the minimum energy is high, then no semi-honest prover can make V accept with probability more than 1 minus beta. So we have a gap in the completeness and the soundness, and you can just repeat the protocol. Like now the gap is only constant, but you need to repeat it many times to make it to boost it to both 1 minus negligible and negligible. The really interesting open question here is, can we prove the security against all cheating provers? So here we can only prove security against semi-honest prover. That's the succinct argument for the construction, the application for succinct argument. So this is, as you may know, this is essentially the quantum analog of Kilian's protocol, or Kilian's delegation scheme based on PCP. So it's Kilian's protocol is very interesting, but it's not clear how do you have a quantum version of it. So this is the first quantum version of Kilian's delegation protocol. But unfortunately, we don't know how to prove it's really secure. It's a really interesting open question. Okay, so speaking of open questions, so now it's the time for open question. Any question regarding this succinct argument?
Okay. Sorry, I have just some simple question.
Yes.
I just want to make it clear if it is the case that the Merkle tree is given. So your goal is to start from a given Merkle tree and then use the prover and verifier to process. And for if this is the case, the tree is given, and then how can you store all the weight if you are going to use the hard random thing? If you are using some hard something, there is some weight inside, right? So it's stored in the local Hamiltonian or anything.
What do you mean by weight?
Compared to the just random no hard metric, there should be some weight for attaching some measure. Is that the case?
You are saying, you are asking how do we like how do we implement this quantum hard unitary or something like that?
Yes.
Oh yeah, so this is a very great question. So okay, so in the in the crypto setting, whenever you talk about a random hash function, you actually don't really mean you have a random hash function, because you don't have a random hash function. It's more like a heuristic. So it's like, so here we talk about a hard random oracle, but essentially what we want to do is that we like take a random quantum circuit, let's see, and we look at this random quantum circuit, and if people are conjecturing that a random quantum circuit is indistinguishable from like a quantum hard random oracle. So if that's the case, then we can just use a random quantum circuit as an implementation of this quantum hard random oracle. So similarly, in the crypto case, when people analyze the random oracle model, but what they are really doing is that they first show that the thing works if they have a random hash function, and then they just replace this random hash function by like some normal hash function like SHA, and they use them in practice. And so it's like a heuristic for analyze. So you don't really have to you don't have to put in a completely hard random oracle. So in the practice, you just want to put something which is sufficiently random. So it's in that answering your question.
Yeah. So can you say again of what's the indistinguishable, in which sense you are talking about, in the measure, or in which sense you are talking about indistinguishable?
Oh, it's so it's the computational. Actually, I will discuss this later. So think about like a polynomial time quantum algorithm. So think about two cases. In the first case, the polynomial time quantum algorithm is given a hard random oracle as an oracle. So the polynomial time quantum algorithm can call a quantum hard random oracle, and then in the second case, the polynomial time quantum algorithm can call a random quantum circuit, can run a random quantum circuit. So by indistinguishable, I mean the polynomial time quantum algorithm cannot see which case it's in. So it cannot distinguish whether it has access to a quantum hard random oracle, or it has access to a quantum random quantum circuit. And you can implement a quantum random circuit by just draw some random circuit and run them. Is that answering your question?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I see.
And so the random oracle model is really a heuristic, but it's used a lot in the cryptographic setting. And the quantum hard random oracle is also it's similar to the quantum random oracle. Of course, the ultimate goal is to get something useful. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I think some open questions actually about them. So let's just go directly to the open question. And so of course, the first open question is that, okay, so what we really want to do is to analyze this quantum hard random oracle model and prove that our succinct argument is actually secure. It's sound against our polynomial time cheaters. So, but it turns out pretty hard. So that's a recent, very beautiful paper by Max Gendry. He introduced the technique called compressed oracle technique, which is extremely useful for analyzing quantum random oracle model. And using this technique, people proved that classical Merkle tree is secure against quantum attacks. So now like, you just still apply Merkle tree to classical bits, but the attacker can use quantum power to attack it. So it's still a classical. So it's just still like a hash, a classical string, but the attacker is quantum. So you need to prove security against quantum attackers. This turned out to be much harder, and it's open for like 2 decades, and only after the paper by Max Gendry, people are able to prove the security for classical Merkle tree against a quantum attacker. So, but now what we want to prove is actually much harder. We want to prove a quantum Merkle tree is secure against quantum attacker. So it seems to be much harder than the proving classical Merkle tree is secure against quantum attacker. So the first step in this direction could be, can we get an analog of the compressed oracle technique for the quantum hard random oracle model? This may be very useful because the compressed oracle technique is extremely useful for quantum random oracle. So if we can make it work for quantum hard random oracle, maybe we'll just solve our problem. And yeah, these 2 papers are the first paper is very influential, and the second paper made some principal use of the first technique to resolve the classical Merkle tree security against quantum attackers. Okay, so this is the first open question. The second open question is that, so essentially what we are doing is a quantum analog of Killian's succinct argument for NP. So this is Killian, 3 decades ago, Killian figured out how do you use commitment and PCP to have succinct argument for NP. And building on Killian's protocol, Merkle gave a non-interactive succinct argument for NP. And so we now have a quantum analog of Killian's succinct argument. Can we also have a quantum analog of Merkle's non-interactive succinct argument for gap K local Hamiltonian? This will also be quite interesting because getting a non-interactive succinct argument is better than getting a interactive succinct argument. Oh, by interactive, I mean that the proof. So in all succinct arguments, there are like 4 messages. The prover first sends the top block. The verifier sends I. The prover reveals something. And the verifier checks. It's like 4 steps. But by non-interactive, it just means that the prover sends something, the verifier checks. That's it. The verifier do not ask questions based on what prover sends. Depending on the setting, that may be like a common reference string, blah blah blah. But essentially, you want to eliminate the interaction. So the question is, can we have a quantum analog of Merkle's non-interactive succinct argument for gap K local Hamiltonian? It's not clear how to directly apply Merkle's construction because there's some technical stuff. That's really interesting question. The third question is that Killian's argument and Merkle's argument can be made zero knowledge very easily, even in the quantum random oracle model. So can we also make the quantum succinct argument zero knowledge too? We have some follow-up work on this in preparation, also with Ramis. So making arguments zero knowledge is a fantastic topic, and people have been working a lot on this direction. So maybe if we can make the succinct argument zero knowledge, this will also be very interesting. And fourth, so we introduced quantum hard random oracle, but maybe the hard random oracle stuff is not really required, and we can just construct a pseudo-random unitary from a random Boolean function. So what do I mean? So what I mean is that in the quantum random oracle, you get access to a to the quantum version of a Boolean function. Maybe you can use that to build an unitary which looks like a hard random unitary. Then you can just use the maybe you can call this random oracle many times to build a new unitary which looks like indistinguishable from a hard random oracle. Then you don't have to get access to a hard random oracle. You can just use the simulated version of a pseudo random hard unitary. So there's some candidate construction in some papers, but they didn't prove it. So it's a very interesting open question. Yes. Finally, the question is how can we instantiate the hard random unitary heuristically? A very natural and interesting candidate is a random quantum circuit with polynomial depth. So say you take a quadratic depth quantum random circuit. Nowadays, people tend to conjecture this random quantum circuit will look hard random in many perspectives. Maybe that's already enough to be used as the required hard random unitary. So let's make a concrete conjecture. A random quantum circuit with quadratic depth is indistinguishable from a hard random unitary by all polynomial time quantum anniversary. In this case, then we can just use a random quantum circuit instead of a very, very large quantum hard unitary. Yeah, that's all. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you for the talks. Very interesting open question, especially.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just a very naive question. Is there any constraint on the tree, the Merkle tree you implement, or you can implement for this kind of tree?
What do you mean by constraints?
Like the depths or the how many?
So I don't think there's any constraint. You can start from any quantum state. You can apply this tree to get a top block and send it to the verifier. The depth will be log n, because each time you shrink the number of qubits in half, so you need a log n application to make it small. So the depth will be log n. That may be the constraint you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So is this kind of thing has application in all local structure like the local Hamiltonian you mentioned? I mean, it's yeah.
Okay, can you say again?
I mean, for application, does it has to find the application in those kind of local structure like local Hamiltonian, or is there any other application you may think of?
Yeah, I think that will be. Yeah, this local Hamiltonian is one application, but in general, it may also have some application in quantum key distribution, I think, and I think it also has. You can also have some application in the zero knowledge proof systems. So we also have some results on constructing quantum zero knowledge proof based on that. Yeah, so in general, this is a way to commit to a big quantum state and then allow random access with a very small cost. So I feel like it should have many other applications, maybe even practical applications, as you want to store a big quantum state on a cloud and be convinced. So that seems also a very interesting, legitimate application. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's quite interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Is there any questions? Okay, if no, and thank you, Lijie. You give us a very nice talk today.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for
Okay.
inviting me.
好，谢谢谢谢。那
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
So hopefully I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Good morning. Yeah, it's actually very late here.